Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Doctor, and Happy New Year. Solutions for long COVID or long vax. If this isn't going to be an eye-opener, I don't know what will be. We are very fortunate tonight. The man who is here to teaches, trains, and lectures doctors all over the world, has taught over 10,000 seminar hours. He's going to have to give me updated stats when he's here next week. Yay, Toronto. In clinical practice for over 3 decades, family man, incredible mentor, awesome friend, the amazing Dr. Bob Rakowski.
Well, Carol, thank you always for the beautiful intro. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I was trying to figure out what was the hottest topic to start with the year, and people often start with New Year's resolution. People talk about weight loss, quit smoking, take up exercise, whatever. But this is a pretty big number. 1 in 5 people who have dealt with COVID still have long COVID. That is a big number. And I'll share some insights to that where there's plenty of data that we can make that go away fast. So if you're dealing with that or know someone who's dealing with that, you may want to refer this to them. Again, 3+ decades in clinical practice, every demographic from the elite to the other end of the spectrum, and having taught over 10,000 hours on 6 continents. So many topics I'm very, very familiar with. And when all this started, I was doing COVID updates every single day for 100 days. And then finally someone said, you know what? You might not want to keep doing that. And you know what? It was a good enough call and a strong enough message that I stopped. So you might notice that there's a lot of information about COVID that maybe didn't get out initially, but let's look at this data. So this was Worldometers. I looked at this just the other day, and here's what it said. Over 700 million cases of COVID. Now, those were certainly diagnostically confirmed by some type of lab test, so people were sick enough to want to get tested. And how many deaths? Well, 6.9 million. We're certainly not going to make light of that. That was very significant. Some countries, it strongly suggested that the deaths were aggravated. When Oxford did an evaluation of Italy, they found out that about 9 out of 10 COVID deaths, the people actually died from something else. They died with COVID, from not from COVID. And the US wouldn't be outdone. It turns out when they audited the US data, 15 of 16 deaths that were called COVID were not COVID. They died with COVID, not from COVID. So are these numbers real? We don't really know, but those are the numbers that we have. Here's what we know. There's about 1 in 4 US adults that have not yet had COVID. 77.5% of people are actually testing for antibodies. So some people were exposed, never, ever had symptoms. So they're calling these people super dodgers. They're calling them novids, and they're saying they want to study them. Well, listen, here's what I know. There's over 10 quintillion viruses on the planet. In 2020, I made it my mission to go get COVID. And you might say, why the heck would you do that? One, I wasn't worried about beating it at all. The people that were dying were in their 70s and 80s and sick. And I'm neither of those, thank God. So I went out and got it for the reason that people that had it could help people that didn't get it yet or that were vulnerable. There's something called convalescent plasma, different topic there. But when I got COVID purposefully, I took my 10 days of quarantine, never had any long COVID. I didn't like it. There was a couple of days that really sucked, but here's the deal. My wife, Kelly, slept in the same bed as me all 10 nights. She never got COVID. So, is she one of these super dodgers or novids? Probably. Blood type O positive, I'm an A positive. O's did better, A's didn't. But nonetheless, we're both fine today. Now, move forward. Our global population has crossed 8 billion. And if you look at the exposure rate, likely 3 out of 4 people have been exposed, if not more. So just take that for a moment. If we have 6 billion people that were exposed, again, I don't want to make light of 6.9 million deaths, but at that 0.11% death rate, or even what they were calling a 1% death rate, it's kind of like a bad flu. It wasn't anything that was worse than the world has seen before. And it had a predisposition towards taking out the elderly and the frail. So those are the people that needed to be protected. And then here's the demographics of who was dying. Very, very hard to die from COVID under 50 unless you were very sick. And then you still had to be sick to die after the age of 50. Now, isn't it interesting that they decided, all right, we're going to come out with a vaccine. And we still need to study this, right? There's plenty of public health experts that say, You don't vaccinate when a pandemic is going, you vaccinate to prevent a pandemic. So there was that debate right up there early on. But notice what this article says, and this is the journal Science, a peer-reviewed, very respected journal. It says there's a rare link between these vaccines and long COVID type illness, and doctors and scientists are beginning to see that that's actually a real problem. If we're going to look and see how this RNA vaccine worked, they literally injected genetic material into people, and that genetic material reprogrammed our cells to make this foreign protein called the spike protein. And the cells would make the spike protein. Now, originally, they thought, you know what, it'll stay right where we inject it in the arm, and these spike proteins won't last very long. But guess what? They weren't right on that. They got throughout the body. They affected in sometimes many major organ systems, and some are suggesting that some people died as a result of these spike proteins. And I'll share that data with you now. So when we start looking at this, SARS-CoV-2 spike protein is a highly persistent, meaning it stays in the body, potentially pathogenic. It can cause disease that can incite inflammation and tissue damage in almost all organ systems. And one of the things that it could do was cause blood clots. Now, there have been over 1 million reported adverse reactions, and some of those very, very serious, right? We'll monitor our language because still, we may not be as free as we want to be to talk about this topic. Now, isn't this fascinating? Millennials, this is what they're talking about here, rapid and record excess death rate in fall of 2021. Now, if we go back to the original, it was very unlikely that millennials would die from COVID unless they were very, very sick. But in this age group, they found over 63,000 excess deaths. And that was just unheard of. And we might have to ask the question, how in the world did that happen? And where this really came into notice was the life insurance companies lost an absolute fortune in 2021. And now I want to share a couple things here. So the first 9 months of 2023, there was 158,000 excess deaths in the first 9 months. Now, interestingly enough, the CDC said, you know what? We're not going to count these anymore. We're not going to update the data. That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand that at all. We should really dig into it and find out what's going on. And this amount of excess death was more than every American that died in every single war since Vietnam. So there's a massive number there. And some elite athletes are dying. So I think it's a very good idea to start looking at that. At one point, the death rates of 35 to 44 were up over 100%. And again, this is something that we should attempt to figure out. And the life insurance companies paid out an extra $100 billion in 2021. And they lost money. Now, how could that happen? Well, people that shouldn't have died, died. Working age people, 25 to 44, almost no probability of death, dying at record numbers. So if we look at how some people get any illness and others don't, and we could talk immune challenges, whether we're talking allergy, autoimmunity, infection, and or cancer, we want to have a balanced and strong immune system. And I'm going to encourage you, go to my YouTube channel, dr_bob_Rakowski, and you can look at this on supercharging the immune system. But very, very simply, I was listening to a guy named John Campbell, a good medical researcher out of the UK. And he said, isn't it fascinating that we have this wonderful immune system that can protect us against 10 quintillion viruses? So we're not worried about the, whatever, 9 quintillion, 999 quadrillion, 999 trillion, 999 billion, 999,999 viruses, but we're worried about that one. And I want you to think about how big that number is. It's absolutely unimaginable. If we actually vaccinated people for 1 million viruses a second their entire life, we wouldn't even come close to denting this entire number. So what if we did immune balancing nutrients? These are proven. I give the PubMed citations. Doesn't matter what's going on with your immune system. Could be any type of infection, yeast, virus, bacteria, parasite, fungus. Could be an allergy, could be an autoimmunity, could be a cancer. These nutrients are proven to be good for the immune system. Vitamin D, DHEA, Ganoderma, perilloseed, resolvin, sealing and healing the gut, and melatonin. And I shared this in 2020. It's fascinating that when this virus first came out in China, people had some really bad cases. And so someone thought, all right, let's look at how they intervene. Some groups got just Western medicine. That would be modern medicine. That would be antivirals, steroids, ventilators, things like that. And one group got the Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, herbs. And when people got Western medicine, 46.2% of them progressed from light to severe disease. And then 39% of those people died. Now, I'll show you how that math works out on the next page. When they got Western medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, only 7.4% progressed to severe disease. So that'd be about 1/7. And only about 9%, call it 9%, died. And that's going to be, again, less than 1/4 of the people died. So let's put real numbers in. If we had 1,000 people that did Western medicine alone, 462 would have progressed to severe. 39% of those 462 would die. That would be 180 deaths. By just adding Chinese herbs, traditional Chinese medicine, only 74 progressed to severe disease and 6.5, call it 7, died. So what was the survival benefit of adding herbs? Over 27x. And you know, when I put this on my Facebook page, immediately I said the world needs to know this. I did this in March 2020. Everybody needs to be taking that. Oddly enough, fact checkers didn't like it, pulled it from my page. What is one of the best traditional Chinese medicines? Ganoderma lucidum. Later on, they came up with a study directly on COVID, and that's what they found out. They found out that Ganoderma was really quite good for COVID. And of course, we have it in the world's best organic coffee. Reishi Ganoderma, same thing. We won that award in 2022. Now, what if people are having long COVID, or we might even say long vax? So this was a study on post-COVID syndrome. And notice what it says. I have it underlined here, and then I blew it up so it's easier to read. Treating several individuals suffering from post-COVID-19 syndrome with a nicotine patch, we witnessed improvements ranging from immediate and substantial to complete remission in just a matter of days. So what did they do? They gave a nicotine patch, which can bind to the same receptor that the COVID protein, spike protein, binds to, but 30 times stronger. So even if the spike protein were there, nicotine could displace it. Now, that's very, very powerful. So what if you don't want to do a nicotine patch? They actually found out that ginkgo has a bioflavonoid, can do it. Lobelia has a bioflavonoid, can do it. And this other plant that I've never used can do it as well. And notice what it says. The results shown here are theoretical evidence of the probable multi-target inhibition of non-structural proteins of SARS-CoV-2. In other words, the spike protein. And these are low cost, no side effect with a long history of use and safety. So very good for essentially anybody to use. And since I'm a picture person, spike proteins bind to this receptor. Nicotine, ginkgo, and lobelia can all displace that spike protein from the receptor. What do we do once it's displaced? Well, we then dissolve it with digestive enzymes. And so they're called proteolytic enzymes, enzymes that break down protein. The medical literature has studied a couple of them. They've studied nattokinase, they've studied lumbrikinase, they've studied something called serrapeptidase. Those are good enzymes. They're a little bit on the expensive side, a little bit specialized. I had patients that had financial issues, and I gave them plant-based proteases and successfully resolved their long COVID and sometimes very, very severe long COVID in fast fashion. So the simple summary is easy. If you feel like you're having any symptoms from either the shot or the virus, take something that will displace the spike protein. That could be nicotine, that could be ginkgo, that could be lobelia, and then take plant-based proteases, not animal proteases, not pancreatic proteases, but plant-based proteases dissolve and digest the enzymes. And again, we're seeing phenomenal results very, very fast. So with that said, I will stop that share. Relatively short in terms of the slide sharing content because it's very, very clear. So any questions about any of that or anything else for that matter?
I will start while we wait for people to type in the chat. So obviously we can get nicotine patches at, the drugstore. What about the other things, the proteases you're talking about? Where can people find said things?
Yeah. So if you want the best quality, you contact a professional provider. So that might be me in the US or one of my friends here, Diane Solano in Canada, Sachin Patel, Dr. Paul, Dr. Ted. They should have these types of things readily available. There probably are some plant-based proteases at higher level nutrition stores that would be decent, not as good as what we have, but still decent. And so I'll go to Teddy Roosevelt here. Do the best you can with what you got where you are. So whatever you can get it and get better.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question in regards to that particular topic? Ray looks like he's pondering.
He is. He's trying to recall, recently met a lady who lost either her hearing or her sense of smell because of COVID, and still this past spring had not gotten it back.
Well, what they're saying is this nicotine patch is the surest way to do it. And so, for instance, I had a functional medicine practitioner reach out to me and I shared that with him. And he said, what's the dose? I said, 3 milligrams a day. And he said, Bob, the standard patches are 7 milligrams. Well, the people that are using it are cutting them in half. So take a 7 milligram patch, cut it in half, put it wherever you go. That's if you want to do that topical nicotine. And I found something interesting in researching and looking a little deeper in nicotine. Nicotine has health benefits. And, even though it's in cigarettes or tobacco was probably never meant to be smoked. And then what they add to cigarettes is even worse. So, if people could get a good pure tobacco, that might help. But the nicotine patches, some people have even done it with nicotine gum. So now my patient base, I let them know, hey, you can buy a nicotine patch, or we could do I have been doing lobelia. Now that I know that ginkgo works, we can add that as well. The people that I've used lobelia with have done quite well. The combination, we do a low dose lobelia every waking hour because it disappears fairly fast from the body. And we do the enzymes every waking hour. And again, 7 to 10 days, people are finding epic relief. Very powerful.
Excellent.
So in any of those cases, it sounds to me like the cost would be very minimal.
I don't know what a nicotine patch costs. Our herbs, between the herbs and the enzymes, 10 days, $120 maybe for all that you need for hourly doses. Pretty reasonable.
Yeah. To get your sense back, whether it's smell or taste. Yeah.
Yeah. So whoever your friend is, reach out to her. I think you said her, and share, and whatever she can do to get it back, that would be a good thing.
Absolutely. A great 2024.
It's a good start, isn't it? I like to start out on a high note usually. But when I looked at what are the hot topics, this is a hot topic. It's still hot. And keep in mind, I'm not convinced that a lot of people are out of the water yet in terms of this spike protein problem. So when I looked up the life insurance companies, one, you could look and see, okay, if someone wanted to get a new policy after the shot, can they get it? It depends on how many they had, and it's going to go up exponentially. And then at one point, they're going to say no. but they're expecting this death rate to continue through 2026. I hope they're wrong. I hope that we get this better with these strategies. And so just with those pieces of data, share this with everybody. I mean, the world has gone through enough with this. And then if we take it a step further, there's plenty of oncologists that are saying they're finding progressively aggressive cancers in younger and younger people. And here's probably the biggest crime. These young people probably never should have had that shot. It didn't stop transmission. It didn't stop infection. And with record deaths in that demographic, some people are saying, I wonder if there's a connection. And will we ever be able to answer that for sure? I don't know, but autopsies are showing spike proteins in vulnerable tissue, including brain and heart. So we want to displace those and digest them as quick as we can.
For sure.
100%.
Yep.
So you were saying, so seeing this is a topic that we don't normally get to ask, I'm trying to still dance around whether or not you're going to get this pulled. So some people didn't get the shot.
Yeah.
And I am suffering from long COVID. However, most of my stuff is gone, but I want to pass that information on to Ted, or perhaps you just pack some stuff in your suitcase on the way up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I could do that. Right. I could certainly do that. Yeah.
Awesome. But so my question is, I did not get the shot.
Yep.
You couldn't pay me to do that. But my daughter works in healthcare. And so in order for them to work in healthcare, they had to get the shot, and she had to have multiple vaccinations. So I think she's up to 3. So there's something about people being near people who have had the shot. How does that work?
Well, they were talking about spike protein shedding, right? So I really doubt that the DNA would actually be able to get into people and make a difference, right? Because it was a very sophisticated medical advancement. I mean, these doctors worked for decades to get this mRNA vaccine. Now, what's so interesting is they had tried it in clinical trial before, and it always failed. And it never got out of animal study for the most part because all the animals died. And they even tried it on humans, and it wasn't successful either. So when they started moving forward with this, they thought, okay, we've got the breakthrough that we need. And then the person that developed the technology said, put the brakes on. No way. We don't need to be doing this. It looks like there's a downside. So where do we go? We go with this protocol. And so I would tell people that when our genes are modified, if we get a viral infection, if we don't kill all the viral infected cells, that virus has the potential to reactivate in our system at any time. So think about a 3-year-old child that gets the chicken pox, and then 70 years later, when this child is a 73-year-old adult, they get the shingles. That was the same virus they got when they were 3. Their genetic material was modified by the virus. And we understand that. We've known that for a long, long time. Once we get the virus, if we don't take care of ourselves, some viruses can reactivate. Well, now the question is, will the cells continue to make spike proteins for the rest of our life? And the jury's still out. Some people, they keep making it and affects tissues, and they're finding that on autopsy. And there's even a German cardiology journal where they were able to tell that the spike protein from the shot is different than the spike protein from the virus. And the spike protein on autopsy in these dead patients was from the shot. So all this is becoming more and more and more available. So what do we do about it? We act on good information. We share truth, we share solutions, and we help people move in that direction. It would be hard to imagine that a doctor now could look at this data and not say, oh boy, we need to do all we can to protect everybody that's been exposed to one or the other. It'd just be impossible for me to imagine. They might be out there, and I don't know. Either they see the world through a different lens than I do, or there's something else that's driving their decision-making. But either way, again, I think everybody needs to be protected.
Well, I find like everybody with what they had for their solutions as we've gone along, we've evolved and learned more things that can help. Everything that I've done has been helpful, but I found that even a common cold has held on and won't let go
Yeah.
ever since I had it. It's like, so something still feels like something's not right. So I can't imagine, because I'm just terrified because my daughter's had all those shots. So
Keep in mind, there were some placebos. So hopefully she got a bunch of those. But let's do everything we can to support her in every way.
all right, a happier topic. Has anybody got another question for him?
Oh, the happiest topic is it's a big problem and we have a legit solution. And we're starting to be able to talk about it. And there's people like John Campbell. He says, I don't understand this. You know, when I look at the data, I don't see how this ever happened in the first place. And he also says, why couldn't we talk about this freely? And those are questions that need to be answered because it was global. And I'll share this because it's commentary. So, for instance, I had a very brilliant patient in today, and he's an expert in his field. And I said, if I asked you 10 fairly standard questions about your field, how many of them would you get right? He said, well, I would bet it'd be 10 out of 10, but maybe on a bad day, I'd only get 9 out of 10. You know, he'd be surprised if he missed one. Well, the people that were asked the questions, how contagious is this? Who do we need to protect? Will lockdown be valuable? Is there valuable to social distancing? Is there value to masks? Is there value to certain medications that were world-renowned, phenomenal medicines? And on, they gave the wrong answer. If we looked at 10 things, the experts were wrong 10 out of 10 times. And that would lead this guy to say, that's impossible. An expert can't be wrong 10 out of 10 times. Either they're totally incompetent or it was intentional. So I'll let people think about that for a bit. I don't know the answer to that, but we could speculate, couldn't we?
And I think that speculation might get this one pulled.
Well, we're just going to bring it up as food for thought rather than saying.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
As I said, it's still going to get pulled, but we can try.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm not putting it on YouTube because YouTube they are what they are.
True. You got Bonnie's attention there. She's smiling away. Did you have any questions tonight, Bonnie? We need to
Yeah, I do for Dr. Bob, and this may or may not be related to long-term COVID symptoms, but what about lightheaded and dizziness and borderline, somewhat high blood pressure being 155 over like 87, but having these bouts of dizziness and not being able to function very well and not being able to think very well?
Well, those are things that are certainly associated with either the long COVID or the long V. And so I would do this protocol. You know, interesting enough, John Campbell, he was saying, you know, when he got his shot, he instantly got high blood pressure. And he's good at monitoring. He'd never had that before. And just like that, he's had it ever since. He said if he had known the risk benefit, he never would have done it. You know, but it wasn't exposed. And in fact, the opposite was said. Hey, these are perfectly safe and perfectly effective. And what are going to turn out? Get this, you know, when they calculated the effectiveness, it was less than 1% effective, 0.8% effective, and for a very limited amount of time. And yet our taxpayer dollars and these companies have made over $100 billion with this. And insurance companies, by the way, paid out that $100 billion for early deaths. So, you know, it'll be an interesting couple of years. You know, I've got some very evolved friends that say, well, hopefully we learn a lot from this, you know, and hopefully we do. And, you know, principles are everything. Carmen asked, what dosage do we follow? Carmen, you know, I'm not sure of the dose on the protease. The ones that I use, I recommend 2 every waking hour and a half a dropper of a combined tincture that has the lobelia. If someone gets too much lobelia, they can actually throw up. So it's a deterrent from taking too much. Ginkgo doesn't have that issue. And the nicotine patch again, you take a half a patch and put it on and displace the proteins. That would be a good plan.
So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
hopefully there's a lot of people that learned how to say no to an experiment.
Yeah. Well, that some people felt like they couldn't, I pray for them. I have patients where they had family members that were about to retire from military with full pension. And they said, you either take the shot or you get a dishonorable discharge. All their service erased. So now if people want to start thinking about politics, maybe we need to put people in there that don't do that to people. I'm not convinced that either side has much to offer at this point. It's hard to imagine. I just don't understand what they're doing there in terms of making decisions. But the good news is we get to vote every couple of years. I don't think I'd vote for any incumbent. Some people talk a good game, but there's very few that are stepping up for us. That's for sure.
Both sides of the border.
Yeah. Well, how about the whole globe? Maybe Antarctica's safe. The penguins don't seem to be complaining much, but every other continent, I'm not so sure of. Well, Africa is better, believe it or not. Plenty of Africa said, we're not doing this. And they have the lowest problem in the world with it. So
Brilliant.
figure that one out. All right. Anything else on this beautiful evening? Next week, we're actually going to have a week off because I'm traveling on my way to the Great White North to Canada for a beautiful 4 or 5 days up there with.
I think you have a whirlwind 5.5 days.
All right. Perfect. All right. Well, with that said, if there are no
Okay.
other questions, I'll say good night and
Well,
God bless.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. And we'll see you in a couple of
Happy
weeks.
New Year and blessings to all of you.
Yes. Blessings to all.
Bye-bye.
Agreed. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.